So this is John chapter 7, the scripture for the 9th of December. Now before diving into this chapter, I think it's important to understand a few things about the Festival of Booths, otherwise known as the Festival of Tabernacles or the Feast of Booths and so on and so forth. This festival is given to the Israelites all the way back in the book of Leviticus, chapter 23, right at the end of the chapter. You can look there if you like. And this festival, it reminded the Israelites how their ancestors had trusted and also grumbled against God while they were in the wilderness for 40 years after leaving Egypt. Throughout this festival, water is carried from a nearby pool and brought to the temple for 7 days during this festival, reminding the people of their dependence upon God to hydrate them in the desert, both by purifying water, as we see in Exodus 17, and also by having water spurt from a rock, as we see in Numbers 20. But it also has like a spiritual aspect to it too, that we need God the same way that our bodies need water. There's an echo of, I believe it's Psalm 42 here. As the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul longs after you. This water is then poured on the altar as thanksgiving to the God who delivered the Israelites then and who will deliver them again with the coming Messiah, the coming anointed one. So keep all this in mind and remember that the religious leaders were still a little hostile, maybe is the right word, a little sore toward Jesus on account of his Sabbath healing in chapter 5. So keeping that context in mind, we see Jesus attending the festival in secret, not wanting to be caught by the Pharisees and to be put on the spot, at least at first. He said to his brothers at the beginning, "My time's not yet come." But then, partway through the festival, he begins to teach, possibly to kind of get his face in front of the crowd a few times before the last and final day of the festival, where Jesus has a lot more to say. So initially, he teaches directly to those in the know, even though the rest of the crowds are kind of listening in. He talks about summarizing how his healing parallels circumcision and the work that's done there on the Sabbath. But as he teaches, the crowds begin to catch on. Oh, this is that guy. This is the guy our religious leaders have been talking about. Perhaps they heard from others about the conflict that Jesus instigated by healing on the Sabbath. And all this leads to the final day of the festival. With the need for water fresh in people's minds, with a priest carrying water to pour over the altar, Jesus shouts to the crowds, pulling their attention, their ears toward him, as this priest is pouring water in the background, claiming that he himself is the living water, the sustenance necessary to survive in the wilderness of life. As God tabernacling among us, remember from John chapter 1, the Lord became flesh and dwelt among us. That means tabernacled among us. Because that's who he is, Jesus is therefore the true water to nourish sin-sick souls. I'll reference this article tomorrow in the John 8 passage, but I've referenced an article below in the description by a pastor and theologian named Rob Bell that kind of gets at some of this stuff and begins to talk through the woman caught in adultery in John 8. You're welcome to read it. Now, several of the people believed an urban legend popularized by some apocryphal writings. You can see this in our apocrypha, I believe 2nd Esdras is where it's at, that the Messiah's birthplace would be unknown. Others, possibly with a little more religious background, a little more religious scholarship, they take issue with Jesus being raised in Galilee instead of Bethlehem, the city of David. This is why both Matthew and Luke emphasize that Jesus was born in Bethlehem, because it gives him street cred to counteract this argument. But in either case, these folks who dismiss Jesus' claims to messiahship because of birthplace, because of where he comes from, they're judging by appearances instead of with right judgment, as Jesus says in verse 24. Now, if you're looking for I am statements, you might have noticed some possible I am statements in this chapter. Interestingly, none of these appear in that form in the Greek. In the next chapter, though, these I am statements are going to occur super frequently, so be on the lookout for them then. Now I wonder, in what ways does your faith in Jesus nourish you? That's all for John chapter 7. Tomorrow, the 10th of December, we'll look at John chapter 8. May God bless you in your reading of Scripture.